Greenbrier, Tennessee is a small community of roughly 7,000 people in Robertson County, a place where violent crime is uncommon and most days pass quietly. But in early February 2025, that peace was shattered. What began as a simple welfare check quickly escalated into a homicide investigation and a tense multi-day manhunt. The events would grip the town, drawing statewide attention and leaving neighbors questioning how such violence had erupted in their midst. It started on the afternoon of February 4th, when deputies from the Robertson County Sheriff's Office were dispatched to a home on Fisher Grove Road in Greenbrier. A concerned family member had requested a welfare check after being unable to reach anyone at the house. When officers arrived and stepped inside, they made a grim discovery. 50-year-old Jeremy Dean Crabtree was dead, lying on the bedroom floor with multiple stab wounds. The crime scene told a clear story of violence. Blood stained the floor and furniture, indicating a struggle had taken place inside the residence. Investigators quickly focused on one person, Jeremy Crabtree's stepson, 39-year-old Jimmy Anthony Cox. Deputies learned that Cox had been staying at the home, recently fallen on hard times and moved back in with his mother and stepfather. Family members later described rising tension between Cox and Crabtree. What began as ordinary household stress and disagreements apparently exploded into a deadly confrontation. Detectives determined that during an argument, Cox allegedly attacked his stepfather with a knife, stabbing him multiple times. By the time deputies arrived at the house, Cox had already fled on foot, vanishing into the cold Tennessee landscape. Within hours, the quiet town of Greenbrier became the center of a massive manhunt. Law enforcement agencies from across the region responded to assist the Robertson County Sheriff's Office. K-9 units fanned out through nearby woods and fields. Drones and helicopters swept low over barns, tree lines, and abandoned structures, scanning for any sign of movement. Deputies combed through sheds and back lots, while anxious neighbors stayed inside and hoping the fugitive wouldn't come their way. Sheriff's officials warned residents to lock their doors and stay vigilant. Schools in the area went on precautionary lockdowns. For many in Greenbrier, it was an unsettling break from their normal routines. This was a community where people often left doors unlocked and knew most of their neighbors by name. Now, patrol cars crept down quiet roads and search teams with rifles moved through properties, their flashlights slicing across fences and hedges. By February 5th, the urgency of the case prompted a statewide alert. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation added Jimmy Anthony Cox to its top 10 most wanted list. They released his photo and physical description, offering a monetary reward for any tip that might lead to his capture. It was a striking escalation that reflected just how concerned officials were and how determined they were to bring Cox into custody before anyone else got hurt. Meanwhile, inside homes across Greenbrier, families followed the unfolding developments on local news. They called neighbors to share updates and double-checked locks before going to bed. The tension was thick, the fear very real. No one knew exactly where Jimmy Cox might be hiding, or whether he was armed and desperate enough to lash out again. The break in the case came later that day. A local resident near Smiley Hollow Road noticed something odd while working on their property. A thin trail of smoke rising from a remote wooded area. It was an unusual sight. There were no houses or campgrounds there, no reason for a fire to be burning. Remembering the warnings from law enforcement and seeing the manhunt dominating local coverage, the property owner decided to call authorities. Deputies moved quickly on the tip. Following the directions, they carefully approached a rocky, forested area known for its small caves and limestone outcroppings. As officers drew closer, they saw faint wisps of smoke drifting from the mouth of a narrow cave. With guns drawn and K-9 units ready, They surrounded the site and ordered whoever was inside to come out. Inside, huddled by a small smoldering campfire, was Jimmy Anthony Cox. Exhausted, cold, and with nowhere left to run, Cox surrendered without resistance. With that, the intense 36-hour manhunt that had upended life in Greenbrier was finally over. Sheriff's deputies handcuffed Cox and walked him out of the cave, leading him down through the brush and mud to waiting patrol cars. Sheriff Michael Van Dyke later praised the teamwork and the vital citizen tip that helped locate the fugitive. He thanked the many law enforcement agencies that had joined the search, as well as the community members who stayed alert and reported anything suspicious. Cox was booked into the Robertson County Jail without bond, charged with criminal homicide for the stabbing death of his stepfather. In Tennessee, criminal homicide is a serious charge that can encompass various degrees of murder or manslaughter, depending on what prosecutors and grand jurors determine. As the legal process began, investigators continued to piece together more about the events inside the home on Fisher Grove Road, examining physical evidence, gathering witness statements, and trying to understand what exactly led to the fatal confrontation. For Greenbrier residents, the arrest brought relief, but also a heavy sadness. Jeremy Dean Crabtree was remembered by friends and family as a kind, steady man who had worked hard to support his household and tried to be there for his stepson during difficult times. The tragedy left his wife grappling with an unimaginable dual heartbreak: the loss of her husband and the devastating reality that her own son was accused of taking his life. Even after the manhunt ended, the emotional scars lingered. Neighbors continued to talk quietly about the violence that had shattered their sense of security. The sight of law enforcement vehicles parked along familiar streets, search dogs moving through backyards, and helicopters circling overhead left an imprint on the community's memory. Greenbrier, a town known more for local football games and family barbecues than crime scenes, would remember February 2025 for years to come. Meanwhile, Jimmy Anthony Cox awaited his day in court from inside a secure jail cell. Legal proceedings were expected to continue into the year, with preliminary hearings, grand jury reviews, and eventually, if it came to that, a trial. For the Crabtree family and the Greenbrier community, justice would hopefully bring some closure, though it could never undo the loss. This was a case that underscored how quickly domestic tensions could erupt into irreversible tragedy, even in the most ordinary of places. It also highlighted how community and law enforcement working together could restore a fragile sense of safety. The Greenbrier Cave Fugitive story remains a somber chapter in the town's history, a reminder of the importance of vigilance, compassion, and the rule of law in holding even the most personal acts of violence to account.